So I've seen a question come up a number of times on various different internet forums, also in a few conversations I've had. It's a question I've even asked myself in the past personally, and the question goes something like this. I've forced a card, now what? And the idea there is that you can force a card on somebody, maybe cut the deck and have them select the card at the cut. And obviously this is a forced card. The likelihood of hitting the ace of spades would be very low. And then what happens after that? Because most magicians know some good forces, good simple forces, and a force can be very, very powerful. But just knowing forces doesn't really make a trick. Knowing how to force a card or have a spectator limit their choice down to one particular or even a small set of cards is not really a good trick. I could force something like the ace of spades on them and not see it and say, you pick the ace of spades. You know, that would be one way to do it. But that's not really a good trick. It's not a good what they call a revelation. And on many of those forums and many of those discussions, usually the answer, the reply that's given is, well, you need to look at this such and such a series by so-and-so called Revelations. And there's a lot of different series out there by that name, by many, many reputable people, and they're all really great, compilations of various tricks. However, that doesn't really work out either, because on most of those series, the revelations that are being taught, the endings of the tricks, really independently depend on different techniques and methods, and very few of them depend on forces. So that doesn't really answer the question. So I want to try to actually hit this head on. And first of all, I want to say I don't think it's a stupid question. A lot of people will say, well, that's kind of a silly question. You're not thinking right. I don't think it's a silly question at all, because the truth of the matter is you could do a whole series of tricks, an entire routine in which you force cards the entire time. So it's a pretty valid question. What kind of outcome would be good for a card force? And if you have a handful of those outcomes and they're all really mind-boggling, you could have yourself a really, really solid routine all built on one simple principle, which is the force. So first, I want to kind of walk this question in reverse a little bit. If I wanted to force a card like the ace of spades, and I could use, again, any methods that, maybe we've looked at before, asking them to stop and cut, show them the bottom card, the Hindu shuffle force, very well-known one. The delay force, you could have them cut the cards anywhere they choose, and then you delay and you talk to them, and then you set the deck on to hold their place. You do some other things over here, and in that delay, eventually you can demonstrate that they selected this card, and you've thereby forced actually the bottom card of the deck. So lots of different ways to force. You have to think, though, that the entire purpose of forcing a card is really limited to one trick. There's just one outcome when forcing cards, and that outcome deals with mentalism. Forcing a card is a mentalist technique. That is, in mentalism, you have a revelation of something that is thought of, or something that is written down and kept separate from the person that is revealing that piece of information. Something that is a prediction, something that has been determined ahead of time before the action of the interaction with the spectator. So forcing cards really is only dealing in mentalism. So once you understand that one basic principle, you can come up with all kinds of different ways to reveal. So let's examine just a few different ideas. Some of these maybe I can show to you. A lot of them I'll just talk to you and give you a few ideas concerning that. So the first thing I'm going to have you do is I'm going to have you select a card. So what I'll do is I'll take the deck here, and I'm just going to thumb through them like this, spread them out, and I want you to just reach out. You can touch any card that you like, and we'll call that your selected card. So we'll just kind of spread these out. Anytime that you're ready, go ahead and touch one. Let's say you touch that one right there. So your selection is this card right here. Go ahead and take a good look at that. You want to memorize it. We'll put it right back in there. I haven't seen it. I don't know what it is. And from here, we'll do a little bit of magic. Okay, so from here we can move on to our outcomes. Now, when you're thinking of outcomes, you want to actually think in reverse. What is it that you want to do? What kind of ending do you want in a card trick? If you could do anything, what would it be? And then you work yourself back from that, really impossible sort of end back towards, in some cases, a force. Okay, so let's think about, one thing that I could never do unless I knew the identity of the card. Well, one thing is a prediction, which we talked about with mentalism. So let's say we had a piece of paper sitting in plain sight the whole time like that, maybe a piece of paper that's been sitting on the street, off on the corner in a puddle somewhere. You can go over to that and you can demonstrate that there is a, some kind of a prediction, or you could magically write it on there, something like that, and end up with the outcome, the Ten of Hearts. So that's one way to do it. Have a prediction written down and then show that to your audience in some sort of manner. Another way that you do the same kind of idea, a prediction outcome, it's really, really popular in street magic, is somewhere on your body have it, written or tattooed in. You see this all the time. It's actually become a bit of a cliche with street magicians, right? So that you have that same idea. It's the same thing, a paper prediction, mentalism prediction, and then this, the pen or tattoo or etched in blood or burned on or, whatever. That is all the same trick. It's really not any different. So that's one idea, a prediction of some sort. The next one I want to talk about is the impossible location. So card to impossible location. It's very easy to do a card to impossible location when you're not signing cards. You're just using regular cards. I could have, a wallet over here. Here's my wallet. Take it out or pick up some other object somewhere else, some other vessel, and you demonstrate that you have the card. It doesn't have to even be the same backed card. This is a different backed card. Now, if you wanted to do a card to impossible location, and you're not signing the card, which would be impossible via the method we're talking about here, you probably want to go through an extra step of making the card disappear. You would want to destroy it or make it disappear in some way so that it is no longer available, and then the implication is that the card traveled to an impossible location. Now, a way to deal with this with a signed card is I put on my channel a while ago a small little idea about signing a card yourself. The premise of that is for people who don't like to do signed card routines because it ruins cards. Let's say you want to keep one nice fresh deck. So you could use a gimmick card, a card that has your signature on it. That wouldn't be a good one to use. You'd want to use something more like this. It doesn't have a lot of ink on it, but you sign it yourself. And then you have a duplicate of that card inside of the deck, and through a magical moment, you transform the card that was selected, which was forced, into the card that is signed now by you. You can wave a marker over it, whatever. Then you end up with a signed card, and from there, the idea on that old video was that you could do signed card effects without having to ruin a deck and having people sign your card. You can just use that one gimmick card all the time. Same idea, if you have two duplicate cards that are signed in exactly the same way or pretty close, you could potentially have your card to impossible location routine set up so that it looks considerably more authentic, when in reality you had total control over the selection of the card and the signing of the card. So that's another possibility. So card to impossible location, that's a second idea. So we have prediction, card to impossible location. Another idea would be a reference, something I call a reference sort of trick or a mirror trick, where you do something on one deck and you bring out a separate deck and you demonstrate that the same thing has happened. So let's say the card was selected and we sandwiched it between two jokers and put them in the deck. And you could even have the spectator do that once the card is selected. Then you pull out another deck, and without handling it, you hand it over to the spectators. They can open it up and see that an identical kind of outcome has occurred, and their card has been selected and then posed into another deck in very much the same way. You could sort of do a invisible deck routine by that method. You could have a card that is turned upside down inside of a separate deck, and it appears to have been freely selected and then transformed in this way. So using a reference, using a second deck in order to reveal what that selection was is another idea. You could also, another idea on that same thing is you could have a card that is a different color or a different back inside of there that is their card. So the only card that is different in here matches the one that's here or is a different one. Sort of the card to impossible location thing. You could even, because you're forcing it, you could have a duplicate of their card from this deck inside of here. And then you could have their duplicate over here. You could force it using one of the forces, like a overhand Hindu shuffle force, where the card is on the bottom, and they never actually see the back. They can, have implied that they've seen the back of the card, and when you force it, they see their selection, and it actually would have the back of this one over here. And then you could put it back inside the deck, and then you could bring out another deck and show them that their card, their 10, has a different back on it, and it matches. You see what I'm getting at here. So there's a lot of different ways that you could use this kind of an outcome, but it's a reference. It's another form of a card to impossible location, I suppose. And then perhaps another idea is using some technology. So let's say that their card has been selected and it was lost inside the deck and you don't know the identity of the card, at least you're not supposed to. You could, posit that you're going to take a cell phone, a picture of the deck here. So I get my cell phone ready. I snap a picture of the deck here, and then I can show them that the picture actually took a photograph of their card somewhere inside of the deck, a magical application or something like that. But using a technology in order to reveal a prediction rather than a piece of paper or something like that. For some reason, it just gives a psychological sort of, advantage when you're revealing something. The idea that the cell phone did the magic when really it's just a prediction. It's a simple prediction. But using technology is a very hip thing to do these days. So those are ideas for you to try out, a few different revelations, and you can of course from these ideas springboard onto many, many, many others and come up with some other outcomes. So we have predictions, impossible locations, some kind of a mirror effect using a second deck where the process is mirrored in that deck. And then finally also you could use technology for your revelation to just kind of give it a little bit of a +1 production value in the end. So those are my ideas on what to do with a force. Think backwards. Think about what you want to do. Don't think about using a force at all. Just think about what do I want to do with a card? What kind of trick do I want to pull off? What do I want the outcome to be? Do I want the card to be on the other side of a piece of glass, go through a table, be found in my shoe? What do I want to do? And then work your way backward, oftentimes with those very difficult outcomes ending with a force being used. So those are my ideas. I wish you the best of luck with this. Try to find your own, and I wish all of you happy magicking.